There are several different ways that psychologists have come to understand how people react to injuries, and we're going to go through these in this video. It will also depend on the extent of the injury, if it is a career-ending injury, those kinds of things. So think about that as we talk about these. So the first one is the stage model, and this is based on Kubler-Ross's model of death and dying. And there's some debate on how accurate this is for death and dying, but it will relate to more significant injuries, so career-ending injuries, and will help you understand how people react at different points in coming to accept the fact that they have a career-ending injury. The problem is it's very global, and it just kind of generalizes everything, so it might give you kind of a way to understand it, but it might not apply to everyone. So the first stage is denial, and I always tell people remember DABDA um, as a mnemonic. So denial, they just refuse to accept that they're injured. They try to continue to function as if they're not injured. They try not to stop. So I recently heard of a story of someone who had a severe knee injury, and even though they were told not to play, they kept playing. So that would be denial. Then anger would be next. So they start to blame other people for what happened to them. They might blame the coach. They might blame their teammates. They might blame the other team. They might blame God. They become aggressive and very irritable. And then the next stage is bargaining. So they try to fix it by kind of negotiating a way through it. So if I do this, I'll get better. Um, the athletic trainer doesn't understand what they're talking about. If I do more, I'll recover faster. And so they might be overly motivated. They might push themselves too hard because if they think if they do this, this will help. They might not follow advice. And then depression, when they start to realize that they're not getting better, they may stop doing. If they realize that they're not going to be able to play, they may stop doing things to work on their recovery. They may become more lethargic, depressed. They may actually become clinically depressed at this point, so that's something to watch for. But they may just have a low mood and feel sad and hopeless. And then hopefully they get to acceptance and they are able to take advice from the people who are working with them and see how they can improve and begin to comply with recommendations. So that's the grief model, and you probably have some ideas about how well this will fit with some of your injured athletes. The next model is the cognitive appraisal model, and this looks at 5 different responses that athletes might have to their injuries. And it's based on how the process that the different athletes go through to deal with stress and to cope. And it's good because it's a little bit better with individual differences and how individuals may respond differently to different injuries. So you can see, like in this case, the stressor would be the injury. Then they have to have their cognitive appraisal. So how are they thinking about the injury? How severe is it? What resources do they have? How able are they going to be to cope to it? And then there's their emotional response. What they're feeling about it, what they're thinking about it, including physiological reactions, and then their coping. So do they seek help? Do they do some relaxation? Do they shut down? And then are they going to recover or not recover right away? Then there's the integrated model, which integrates more of a stress process model. So after the injury, they do a cognitive appraisal. So just as we talked about in the previous slide, they start to think about how they're going to assess the situation. Does it make them sad? Does it make them angry? Does it make them worried? And this model allows people to think about like things that have happened before the injury, so that might make it more difficult to recover or process the injury. So again, it includes the cognitive, the behavioral, the emotional responses all together. That's why it's integrated. And sometimes that can be a better way to understand people and how they process things. So you can see here, we talked about some of those personality factors in the last lecture and how they might affect people and their understanding of injury and potential for recovery. Also, what other stressors they have going on in their lives. Have they been injured before? Has this happened in the past? Are they also going through something else stressful? What resources they have to access? and then what interventions they can have used before and have been helpful. So then they have how they typically react to stress is their stress response, and then when they're injured, what happens. So um, those can really affect them. The previous injury is how they respond to stress usually, and how they think about this current injury, which is the cognitive appraisal. And then there's all sorts of personal factors that go into this. Um, their personality, like we talked about, their pain tolerance, how much is being an athlete part of their identity, their gender, um, their self motivation, also what when it is in the season, is it preseason, is it during a game, is it during practice, were they starting or not, also how their team supports them, their coach and their relationship with them, um, their whole approach to understanding sports, and then the environment. And all of those things will go into that cognitive appraisal and will help them develop what behavioral response and emotional response they are going to develop um, in regards to thinking about the injury, and then how likely they are to recover and how quickly. Another model is the biopsychosocial model, and this takes in aspects of the biology of the individual, their psychological mindset, personality, those things, and then also social factors, so like team environment, family, those, and how that affects their ability to recover. So there are, and similar to the integrated model, there's lots of different things that go into how quickly somebody will recover from an injury. And so, like some people have previous injuries, they have a higher pain tolerance. So those are some of the biology things. And then their psychological things are, how they deal with pain, um, what coping resources they have, and they influence each other. So if you don't deal well with pain, and then that makes it harder to cope. If you're already not good at coping, that's going to make it harder to deal with pain. So it's bidirectional, um, and they can really affect how quickly somebody recovers. So you can see here if this helps you think about it. So some of the things that are going on physiologically with the person, um, how easily their stress hormones get reacted, and that's also attributed to neuroticism. That people high in neuroticism get stressed out more easily. So any injury is going to stress them out more. That's going to make them have different thoughts about their injury and their recovery. Um, and then there's also psychophysiological stressors, so other things that are going on in their life, intense physical training, behavioral things like are they sleeping? This is something that college students are notorious for not taking care of themselves, not complying with treatment, and all of these things go together to influence how long it's going to take for them to recover. And this kind of goes back to some of the personality things. There's also personal factors to consider when we consider recovery, and we'll talk about that in the next lecture.